Maya had been saying "see you tomorrow, sir" to the quiet man at table 12 for 3 months when his attorneys walked through the cafe doors and announced he was worth $34 billion. In that instant, every polite goodbye she had ever given him became a threat to everything she thought she understood about survival, kindness, and the impossible distance between poverty and power. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Some gestures become rituals without us ever noticing. For Maya Chun, a 26-year-old waitress working double shifts at the Riverside Cafe, saying "see you tomorrow, sir" to the quiet man in the corner booth had become as automatic as breathing. For Marcus Westfield, a man whose net worth could fund a small nation, those 5 words had become the only genuine human connection in a life wrapped in layers of deception and isolation. She thought he was just another lonely regular trying to stretch out his coffee. He was a billionaire hiding in plain sight. Her simple courtesy was about to shatter both their carefully constructed worlds. This is the story of how a waitress's kindness and a powerful man's secret collided in the most unexpected way, revealing that sometimes the people we see every day are the ones we never truly see at all. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the Riverside Cafe, casting geometric shadows across the polished wooden tables. It was that peculiar time between the lunch rush and the evening crowd when the cafe seemed to exhale, settling into a comfortable quiet punctuated only by the hiss of the espresso machine and the soft murmur of conversation. Maya Chun moved through this familiar landscape with the practiced efficiency of someone who had walked these same paths thousands of times, her body on autopilot while her mind drifted to more pressing concerns. The rent was due in 3 days. Her younger brother's tuition payment was already 2 weeks late. Her mother's medical bills from last month's emergency room visit sat unopened in her bag, too frightening to face. Maya had become an expert at mental arithmetic, constantly calculating and recalculating the impossible math of survival. She earned decent tips at the Riverside, better than at her previous jobs, but decent was still miles away from enough. She cleared table 7 with swift, economical movements, stacking plates with the quiet precision of someone who understood that dropped dishes meant deducted pay. The afternoon shift was slower, which meant fewer tips, but also fewer demanding customers. It was during these quieter hours that Maya allowed herself small moments of observation, watching the lives that passed through the cafe's doors like scenes from movies she would never star in. The businesswoman in the tailored suit, typing furiously on her laptop, probably closing deals worth more than Maya would earn in a lifetime. The young couple by the window, laughing over shared pastries, their biggest concern seemingly which dessert to order. The elderly man who came every Tuesday, always ordering the same pot of Earl Grey, always leaving exactly 15%, counted down to the penny. Each person carried their own universe of concerns and joys, most of which would forever remain mysteries to her. And then there was him, table 12, the corner booth with the best view of the river. He had started coming in about 3 months ago, always at the same time, always alone, always ordering the same thing, black coffee and whatever sandwich was on special. He was perhaps in his early 50s, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he had seen more of the world than he cared to remember. His clothes were neat but unremarkable. Dark jeans, button-down shirts, and muted color. A jacket that looked comfortable rather than fashionable. There was something about his stillness that set him apart. While other customers scrolled through phones or tapped at laptops, he simply sat, watching the river through the window with an expression that seemed to hover between contentment and profound sadness. Sometimes he brought a newspaper, but more often he just sat with his coffee, lost in thoughts that Maya could only imagine. She had learned over the years of serving countless strangers to read people through small details. The businesswoman ordered in clipped tones and never made eye contact, armor against a world that demanded constant vigilance. The couple leaned into each other, their body language open and trusting, still in that honeymoon phase where the world beyond their bubble barely registered. The elderly Tuesday regular kept his coat on even in summer, the habit of someone who had learned to be ready to leave at any moment. But the man at table 12 was harder to read. He was unfailingly polite, his thank you always genuine, his rare smiles reaching his eyes. He left generous tips, not ostentatiously large, but solid 25%, enough to make a real difference in her daily earnings. Yet there was a loneliness around him that was almost tangible, a isolation that seemed self-imposed rather than circumstantial. The bell above the door chimed and Maya glanced up from wiping down table 7. Right on schedule, 3:15 on a Wednesday afternoon, the man was making his way to table 12. His movements were unhurried but purposeful, and Maya noticed, not for the first time, the quiet confidence in the way he carried himself. It was subtle, not the aggressive swagger of someone trying to prove something, but the calm assurance of a person completely comfortable in their own skin. She gave him a few minutes to settle in before approaching with her notepad and practice smile. The smile was real enough, she genuinely didn't mind his presence. In a job filled with demanding customers and complicated orders, his consistency was almost comforting. "Good afternoon," she said, her voice carrying the practiced warmth of professional friendliness. "The usual today?" He looked up, and for a moment his gray eyes met hers with an intensity that was almost startling. Most customers looked through service workers, not at them, but he always made eye contact, always acknowledged her as a person rather than a function. "Please," he said, his voice low and measured. "And how are you today, Maya?" He had learned her name from her name tag weeks ago and had used it ever since. Another small gesture that separated him from the majority of customers who never bothered. "Can't complain," she replied automatically, the service worker's default response to personal inquiries. In truth, she could complain extensively, but nobody wanted to hear about her problems, and sharing them wouldn't solve anything anyway. Something flickered across his face, a moment of recognition or perhaps understanding that surprised her. For a second, she wondered if he could see through her professional facade to the exhaustion and worry beneath, but the moment passed and he simply nodded. "One black coffee and today's special coming right up," she said, retreating to the safety of her professional routine. As Maya worked, preparing his order with the same care she gave every customer, she found her thoughts drifting back to him. It wasn't attraction exactly, though he was handsome in a lived-in, weathered way. It was more curiosity mixed with a strange sense of kinship. He seemed like someone carrying weight, invisible burdens that pressed down on shoulders that had learned to bear them without complaint. She recognized that weight because she carried her own version of it every day. The cafe had started to fill with the early evening crowd by the time she brought his order to table 12. She set down the coffee and sandwich with practiced precision, ensuring the cup handle faced the right direction, the napkin positioned just so. Small details that most people never noticed, but that made the difference between adequate service and good service. "Here you are, sir," she said, stepping back. "Thank you, Maya." He wrapped his hands around the coffee cup as if drawing warmth from it, though the cafe was perfectly comfortable. "This is the best part of my day, you know." The statement caught her off guard. She had received many compliments on her service, some genuine, some obligatory, and a few that carried uncomfortable undertones she had learned to deflect. But this felt different, more honest, and somehow sadder. "The coffee?" she asked lightly, unsure how else to respond. A small smile touched his lips. The normalcy, the routine, the feeling of being just another person in a cafe. It was the most personal thing he had ever said to her, and Maya felt something shift in the air between them. She should have just smiled, nodded, and moved on to her other tables. But something in his tone, a vulnerability that seemed to have slipped past his usual guardedness, made her pause. Sometimes normal is underrated, she found herself saying. Everyone's always chasing extraordinary, but there's something to be said for the steady and predictable. He looked up at her then, really looked at her, and she saw surprise and recognition in his expression. "Yes," he said quietly, "exactly that." The moment stretched between them, loaded with unspoken understanding. Two people from completely different worlds finding unexpected common ground in a quiet cafe on a Wednesday afternoon. The spell broke when another customer called for service, and Maya excused herself with a professional smile, but as she moved through the rest of her shift, she found herself more aware of table 12, of the solitary figure who seemed to find refuge in the Riverside Cafe's unremarkable routine. Hours later, as the evening shift began and the cafe's atmosphere shifted from afternoon calm to evening energy, he prepared to leave. Maya had been clearing nearby tables, timing her movements so she would be close when he finished. It had become part of their unspoken routine. He left bills on the table, always cash, never a credit card, and stood with the careful movements of someone whose body carried old injuries or simply the weight of too many years of tension. As he pulled on his jacket, Maya approached to collect the payment. "Thank you," he said, as he always did. "Same time tomorrow?" It was a question he had never asked before. Usually he simply left, their next encounter assumed but never confirmed. Maya felt herself smile, a genuine expression that had nothing to do with professional courtesy. "I'll be here," she replied, then surprising herself with the addition. She added something she had said countless times to countless customers, but never quite meant the way she meant it now. "See you tomorrow, sir." He paused in the act of buttoning his jacket, and something complex and unreadable crossed his face. For a heartbeat, he looked like a man on the verge of saying something important, something that would change everything. But the moment passed, and he simply nodded. "Tomorrow," he confirmed, and walked out into the evening. Maya watched him go, then turned her attention to clearing table 12. The tip was, as always, generous but not excessive. But tucked under the coffee cup, hidden from casual view, was something else. A business card, pristine and expensive looking, with minimal text. Just a name, Marcus Westfield, and a phone number. No company, no title, no indication of what he did or why he might be giving her his card. She turned it over. On the back, in precise handwriting, were 5 words that made her heart skip. "If you ever need help." Maya stood there, the card between her fingers, the weight of those 5 words pressing down on her more heavily than any of the problems that had consumed her thoughts all day. Why would a quiet regular, a man who came for coffee in solitude, offer help to a waitress he barely knew? What kind of help could someone like him, someone who seemed to be escaping something rather than building something, possibly provide? She slipped the card into her apron pocket, her mind spinning with questions she had no way to answer. Around her, the cafe continued its evening rhythm, customers coming and going, orders called and fulfilled, the endless cycle of service industry life rolling forward. But something had shifted, some invisible line had been crossed, and Maya Chun felt the first stirrings of unease mixed with curiosity. She had no way of knowing that the card in her pocket carried the private number of one of the world's wealthiest men. She couldn't have guessed that Marcus Westfield was really Marcus Wellington Ashford, the reclusive billionaire whose face rarely appeared in public, whose business empire touched virtually every aspect of modern life, whose decision to hide in plain sight in a modest cafe was about to collide with her desperate need for exactly the kind of help only unlimited resources could provide. Tomorrow would come as it always did. But tomorrow, Maya's simple farewell would take on a meaning neither of them could have anticipated. Tomorrow, the quiet man at table 12 would have his cover blown in the most unexpected way. And tomorrow, a poor waitress and a billionaire in disguise would discover that sometimes the people we overlook every day are the ones holding the keys to our salvation. Maya didn't sleep well that night. The business card sat on her nightstand, its pristine white surface almost glowing in the darkness of her cramped studio apartment. She had pulled it out a dozen times, studying the minimal text as if repeated examination might reveal hidden meaning. Marcus Westfield. The name meant nothing to her. A Google search on her cracked phone screen had yielded nothing useful. Just a few social media profiles of people who were clearly not the same man. Some professional listings that seemed equally irrelevant. If you ever need help, the words circled in her mind like birds looking for a place to land. What kind of help? And why offer it to someone he barely knew? Maya had learned long ago that nothing came without strings. That kindness from strangers usually had price tags that weren't immediately visible. Years of navigating the world as a working-class woman had taught her to be suspicious of offers that seemed too good, too easy, too convenient. And yet there was something about him, about the genuine sadness in his eyes and the careful way he had hidden the card under his coffee cup, that made her want to believe the offer was real. She thought about his comment earlier that day about the cafe being the best part of his day, about wanting to feel normal. Those weren't the words of someone playing games. Those were the words of someone who understood what it meant to be tired of fighting, to crave simple human connection without complication. The rent notice on her tiny kitchen counter provided its own commentary on her situation. 3 days. She had 3 days to come up with $1,200 or face eviction. Her brother's college had already sent 2 warning letters about his unpaid tuition. Her mother's medical bills from the emergency room visit continued to pile up, each envelope another weight on her conscience. She was drowning in slow motion, and everyone around her was too busy with their own survival to throw her a line. Maya rolled over and looked at the card again. Her pride screamed at her to throw it away, to show up for her shift tomorrow and pretend nothing had happened, to maintain the professional distance that kept her safe from disappointment. But her desperation whispered something else, something that sounded dangerously like hope. The next afternoon arrived with the inevitability of gravity. Maya showed up for her shift at the Riverside Cafe with the business card tucked into her pocket, its presence a constant weight against her hip. She moved through the early afternoon with mechanical efficiency, taking orders and delivering food while her mind spun through scenarios and possibilities. Would he even come today? Had the card been an impulse he now regretted? Should she say something or pretend she never received it? 3:15 arrived. The door opened, he walked in. Everything about him seemed the same. The same unhurried walk, the same quiet confidence, the same journey to table 12. But Maya found herself seeing him differently now, searching for clues about who he really was beneath the carefully unremarkable exterior. His clothes, which she had always dismissed as ordinary, now seemed deliberately chosen for their anonymity. His watch, barely visible beneath his sleeve, looked expensive in a way that whispered quality rather than screaming status. Even his posture, relaxed but alert, suggested someone accustomed to command but choosing to set it aside. Maya took a breath and approached his table with her notepad at the ready. "Good afternoon," she said, proud that her voice came out steady. "The usual?" He looked up, and in his eyes she saw the question. Had she found the card? What would she do about it? But his voice remained casual, his expression carefully neutral. "Please. And perhaps some of that apple pie I saw in the case earlier, coming right up." She hesitated, her hand moving unconsciously to her pocket where the card rested. "Sir, I wanted to—" "Marcus," he interrupted gently. "Please, just Marcus." The intimacy of the first name felt like crossing a threshold. Maya nodded slowly. "Marcus, I found your card." Something shifted in his expression, tension and relief mixing in equal measure. "I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't leave it." "Why did you?" He was quiet for a moment, his fingers drumming lightly on the table. "Because I've watched you for 3 months, Maya. I've seen you working double shifts. I've noticed the tiredness you try to hide. I've overheard enough phone conversations during your breaks to know you're carrying weight that would crush most people." He held up a hand before she could speak. "I wasn't eavesdropping intentionally. This is a small cafe. Sound carries. But I recognize that particular kind of exhaustion because I've felt it myself, just in different circumstances." Maya felt her cheeks flush, embarrassment warring with something that felt uncomfortably like being seen. "I can handle my own problems. I'm sure you can. You've been handling them admirably." His voice was gentle, without a trace of condescension. "But sometimes we all need help. And there's no shame in accepting it when it's offered freely." "Nothing is ever offered freely," Maya heard herself say, her cynicism rising like a shield. "Everyone wants something." Marcus leaned back, studying her with those gray eyes that seemed to see too much. "You're right to be cautious. I would be too in your position. So let me be transparent. I'm offering help because I can, and because helping you would make me feel useful in a way my actual life rarely allows. The only thing I want in return is the satisfaction of knowing I made someone's burden a little lighter. It sounded too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But Maya found herself wanting desperately to believe him. I don't even know who you are. For all I know, you could be anyone. A strange expression crossed his face, something that looked almost like guilt. You're right, you don't know me. And I've been content to let you make assumptions. But if you're going to trust me enough to accept help, you deserve to know the truth. Maya's heart began to beat faster. She glanced around the cafe, suddenly aware that they were having an intense conversation in the middle of her workplace. I should get your order, Maya. The way he said her name stopped her. I need to tell you something. But not here. Not like this. If you're willing, if you can spare an hour after your shift, meet me. There's a bench by the river. Just outside. We can talk properly. Every instinct screamed danger. Meeting a customer outside of work, especially one she barely knew, violated every rule of self-preservation she had learned. But something in his voice, a vulnerability that seemed to cost him something to reveal, made her pause. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't, he said simply. Not yet, but I'm hoping you'll give me the chance to earn that trust. He paused, then added quietly, I promise you're safe with me, and I promise that what I have to tell you will explain everything, including why I've been sitting in this cafe every afternoon for 3 months pretending to be someone I'm not. The last part caught her attention, pretending to be someone he wasn't. That suggested he was actually someone else, someone significant enough that pretending was necessary. Maya's mind raced through possibilities, none of them making complete sense. 1 hour, she found herself saying, after my shift ends at 7, but it's in public by the river where people can see us. Relief washed over his face. Of course, thank you, Maya, for giving me a chance to explain. She nodded and retreated to put in his order, her hands shaking slightly as she wrote down black coffee, sandwich, and apple pie. The rest of her shift passed in a blur of anxiety and anticipation. She went through the motions of service while her mind spun through scenarios, each more unlikely than the last. Who was Marcus Westfield? What was he hiding? And why did she feel like her entire life was about to change based on a conversation with a lonely man who liked his coffee black? When 7 o'clock finally arrived and Maya clocked out, she felt like she was walking toward a cliff edge in the dark. She changed out of her uniform in the staff bathroom, pulled on her jacket, and stepped out into the evening air. The river reflected the city lights, creating a shimmering path of gold and silver on dark water. The bench Marcus had mentioned was easy to spot, positioned under a street lamp with a clear view in all directions. He was already there, sitting with his hands folded in his lap, staring out at the water. When he heard her footsteps, he turned and she saw relief flash across his face. You came. I'm here, Maya said, keeping her distance, standing rather than sitting. You said you'd explain. Marcus nodded slowly. I did, and I will. He took a breath, and Maya could see him gathering courage, which seemed odd for a man who carried himself with such quiet confidence. My full name is Marcus Wellington Ashford. The reason you couldn't find anything when you searched for Marcus Westfield is because Westfield is my mother's maiden name. I use it when I want to move through the world without recognition. The name Wellington Ashford rang a distant bell, something she had heard in passing but couldn't quite place. Marcus must have seen the confusion on her face because he continued, his voice soft and almost apologetic. Wellington Ashford Technologies, Wellington Ashford Industries, Wellington Ashford Global Investments. My family owns. I run them. Or I'm supposed to. In reality, I'm the face on the letterhead while teams of people do the actual work. He paused. According to Forbes, I'm worth approximately $34 billion. The number was so large it didn't feel real. Maya heard it, processed it, and then her mind simply rejected it as impossible. Billionaires didn't sit in modest cafes drinking coffee and eating sandwich specials. They didn't offer business cards to waitresses. They didn't look at people like her as if she mattered. You're lying, she said, but even as the words left her mouth, pieces were clicking into place. The expensive watch hidden under his sleeve, the quality of his seemingly simple clothes, the way other customers sometimes did double takes when they saw him, as if recognizing something familiar they couldn't quite name. The practiced way he blended into the background despite his natural presence. I wish I were, Marcus said, and the weariness in his voice carried the weight of truth. I've spent 3 months coming to the riverside because it's the only place in my life where people don't want something from me, where I can sit and be nobody special, where a kind waitress says, see you tomorrow. Sir, it means it is simple courtesy rather than calculated networking. Maya finally sat down, her legs suddenly unsteady. $34 billion. Give or take a few billion depending on market fluctuations, she laughed. A slightly hysterical and you've been ordering the sandwich special because it's a good deal? A small smile touched his lips. I order it because it's actually delicious and because it's what a normal person would order. I've been trying to remember what normal feels like. They sat in silence for a moment, the river flowing past them, the city humming with its evening energy. Maya's mind was reeling, trying to reconcile the quiet regular customer with the unfathomable reality of billions of dollars. Why tell me? She finally asked. You could have just stayed hidden because you needed help, and I can provide it. But I couldn't do that honestly without you knowing who I really am. He turned to face her fully. I meant what I said, Maya. I want to help. No strings, no expectations, no agenda beyond making your life a little easier. You can accept or refuse, but I needed you to make that choice with full information. This is insane. Yes, he agreed simply. But is it more insane than drowning in medical bills and rent you can't pay while working yourself to exhaustion? Sometimes insane is just what we call miracles we weren't expecting. Maya looked at him, really looked at him, and saw not a billionaire but a lonely man who had found an unexpected refuge in her small kindness. She thought about the rent notice, about her brother's tuition, about her mother's medical bills. She thought about pride and desperation, about fear and hope, about all the ways life pushed people into impossible choices. If I say yes, she said slowly, what happens next? Marcus smiled, and it transformed his entire face. Tomorrow you show up for work and say, "See you tomorrow, sir." Just like always, and everything changes. Maya didn't give him an answer that night. She couldn't. The magnitude of what he was offering, of who he was, felt too large to process standing by a river with street lamps casting long shadows and the sound of traffic humming in the background. Instead, she thanked him for his honesty, told him she needed time to think, and walked home through streets that suddenly felt different, as if the revelation of his identity had somehow altered the fundamental nature of reality itself. Her apartment, when she finally climbed the 3 flights of stairs and unlocked the door, felt smaller than ever. The single room that served as bedroom, living room, and dining room, the tiny kitchenette with its temperamental stove, the bathroom barely large enough to turn around in, all of it seemed to shrink under the weight of knowing that the man who drank coffee at table 12 could probably buy the entire building with what he spent on lunch. And the contrast was dizzying, the gap between their worlds so vast it felt unbridgeable. She lay awake most of the night, staring at the water-stained ceiling, her mind a battlefield of warring impulses. Pride insisted she refused, that accepting help from a billionaire would somehow diminish her, would make her dependent, would transform her from a struggling but independent woman into a charity case. Fear whispered that this was too good to be true, that there had to be a catch, that men with that much money didn't help waitresses out of simple kindness. But beneath both pride and fear, desperation spoke in a quieter voice, reminding her of the rent notice, the tuition bills, the medical debt that grew like a tumor, choking off her future $1 at a time. And then there was something else, something harder to name. In those 3 months of serving him coffee and exchanging pleasantries, something had developed. Not romance, not exactly, but a recognition. 2 people, both exhausted by different versions of the same fundamental loneliness, finding brief respite in routine and simple human courtesy. He had been honest about that. The cafe was his escape from a world that saw him only as a resource to be tapped, and she had to admit his presence had become something she looked forward to, a bright spot in shifts that were otherwise grinding repetition. When morning came, Maya was no closer to a decision. She went through her day like a ghost, showering in the cramped bathroom, dressing in her uniform, making the commute to the riverside on a bus that smelled of diesel and resignation. Every moment felt weighted with significance, as if the universe itself was holding its breath, waiting to see what she would choose. The morning shift was busy, which was a blessing. She lost herself in the rhythm of service, taking orders and delivering food, refilling coffee cups and clearing tables, the familiar choreography of hospitality keeping her mind occupied. But as 3 o'clock approached, as the afternoon lulls settled over the cafe and table 12 sat empty and waiting, Maya felt her heartbeat accelerate. 3:15 came and went. He didn't appear. Maya felt a strange mix of disappointment and relief. Perhaps he had changed his mind, realized that his offer had been impulsive, decided that maintaining his carefully constructed anonymity was more important than helping a waitress he barely knew. Perhaps this was the universe's way of making the decision for her, removing the choice before she had to confront what accepting would mean. But at 3:30 the door opened. He walked in and Maya felt something in her chest unclench. He caught her eye immediately, offered a small apologetic smile, and made his way to table 12. She gave him a few minutes to settle, then approached with her notepad, surprised by how nervous she felt. "The usual?" she asked, her voice steady despite the butterfly sensation in her stomach. "Please." He looked up at her, his gray eyes searching her face. "I apologize for being late. Conference call that ran over. One of the many joys of running a global company while trying to pretend you're taking a sabbatical." The casual mention of his wealth and power felt surreal in the everyday setting of the cafe. Maya glanced around, suddenly hyper-aware of the other customers, the other staff, all of them going about their business completely unaware that one of the world's richest men was sitting in a corner booth ordering a sandwich special. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said, about your offer." Marcus's expression shifted, becoming more focused, more intense. "And I want to understand something first. You said no strings, no expectations. But there has to be something. People don't just give away money, especially not people who have as much as you do. So what is it you really want?" He was quiet for a long moment, considering his answer with the careful thought of someone who understood that words mattered, that truth had weight. "I want to feel useful. I want to know that my wealth, which I did very little to earn beyond being born into the right family, can actually change someone's life in a meaningful way. And selfishly, I want to keep coming here to this cafe, to table 12, and have you greet me the same way you always have. I want to preserve the one place in my life where I'm just Marcus, a regular who likes his coffee black. The honesty in his voice was palpable. Maya had heard plenty of lies in her life, smooth words that concealed ugly truths, and she had learned to recognize the difference between performance and authenticity. This felt authentic. My rent is due in 2 days, she heard herself say. $1,200. I have about $400 saved. I've been trying to figure out how to come up with the rest without success. Consider it handled. My brother's tuition is $8,000 past. He's brilliant, Marcus, top of his class in computer science. But the school is threatening to drop him if we can't catch up on payments. I'll have it paid by end of business today. My mother's medical bills from her emergency room visit last month are just over $6,000. They've been sending increasingly aggressive collection notices. Taken care of. Maya felt tears prick at her eyes. It was too easy. It shouldn't be this easy. A few words and problems that had been crushing her for months simply evaporated. Why? She whispered. Why does it matter to you? Marcus leaned forward, his voice low enough that only she could hear. Because I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes, and most days it feels like a burden rather than a blessing. Because I'm surrounded by people who see me as a bank account or a business opportunity, and you saw me as a customer who likes his coffee a particular way. Because you said, "See you tomorrow, sir," like you actually meant it, like my presence was welcome rather than inconvenient. That kind of simple human kindness is rarer than you might think in my world. Maya, it's worth more to me than you could possibly understand. She stood there, notepad forgotten in her hand, trying to process the surreal reality of the moment. I don't know how to accept this. I don't know what it makes me. It makes you smart enough to recognize when help is genuine and brave enough to accept it. There's no shame in that, Maya. None at all. She nodded slowly, not entirely convinced but willing to believe. Okay. Yes, I accept. And thank you. Thank you more than I can say. The relief on his face was genuine and profound. Thank you for trusting me. Now, I believe I ordered coffee and a sandwich. Maya laughed, a watery sound that released some of the tension knotting her chest. Coming right up, the rest of the afternoon passed in a strange haze. Maya went through the motions of her job while her mind reeled with the implications of what had just happened. By accepting Marcus's help, she had crossed a line, entered into a relationship that defied easy categorization. He wasn't quite a friend, certainly not a romantic interest, not a client or a benefactor in any traditional sense. He was something entirely new, something without a name or precedent in her experience. When her shift ended and she prepared to leave, Marcus was still there working on a laptop he had pulled from his bag. He looked up as she approached to say goodbye. Maya, he said, I'll need your information. Bank account details for the rent, your brother's school information for the tuition, the hospital billing for your mother's medical expenses. You can email it to the address on my card. The practical details felt jarring after the emotional intensity of early on. Right, of course. I'll send it tonight. And Maya? He held her gaze. Tomorrow at 3:15 I'll be here. You'll bring me black coffee and whatever the special is, and we'll continue as we have been. That's the only thing I ask. Let me keep this place, this routine, this small pocket of normal. She smiled, understanding what he was really asking. Don't treat me differently. Don't let the money change what we have here. See you tomorrow, sir. The words felt different now, weighted with new meaning but somehow more genuine than ever. She wasn't just a waitress saying goodbye to a customer. She was a woman acknowledging a connection that transcended the transactional nature of their relationship, that existed in the space between service and friendship, between gratitude and equality. That night, Maya sent the requested information to his email address. Within an hour, she received confirmation. Her rent, paid in full. Her brother's tuition, current and covered for the next semester. Her mother's medical debt, cleared completely. Just like that, with a few keystrokes and the casual deployment of wealth so vast she couldn't comprehend it, her most pressing problems had been solved. She should have felt nothing but relief. And she did feel relief. Enormous, crushing relief that made her want to sob and laugh simultaneously. But underneath the relief was something more complicated. A knot of emotions she couldn't quite untangle. Gratitude, yes, but also a strange sense of debt, despite his insistence that there were no strings. Confusion about what this meant for their relationship going forward. And perhaps most unsettling, a growing awareness that accepting his help meant accepting him into her life in a way that felt both exciting and terrifying. Her phone rang. It was her brother, his voice high with disbelief and joy. Maya, the school called. Everything's paid. Everything. How did you do this? She hesitated, unsure how to explain. I got some help. From someone who wanted to help. Who? Maya, nobody just pays $8,000 out of nowhere. What did you have to do? The assumption in his voice that such generosity must come with a price stung even as she understood it. That was the world they lived in, where kindness was suspect and help came with invisible chains. Nothing, she said firmly. I didn't have to do anything. Sometimes people are just kind and we have to learn to accept it. She wasn't sure if she was trying to convince him or herself. The next afternoon, Maya arrived at the riverside with a strange mix of anticipation and anxiety. Everything was the same, the familiar cafe with its warm wood and large windows, the same customers, the same routine, but she felt fundamentally changed. As if accepting Marcus's help had altered something essential about her place in the world. At 3:15 exactly, he walked through the door. Their eyes met across the cafe, and in that moment of recognition, Maya understood that he too was nervous, uncertain how this this new dynamic would play out. She approached his table with her notepad and her professional smile, determined to give him what he had asked for. The preservation of their normal routine. "Good afternoon," she said. "The usual today?" Marcus's face relaxed into a genuine smile. "Please. And how are you today, Maya?" "I'm good," she said, and for the first time in months, it wasn't a lie. "Really good, I'm glad to hear it." His voice was warm, carrying layers of meaning that didn't need to be spoken aloud. As Maya walked away to place his order, she felt the weight that had been pressing on her shoulders for so long finally begin to lift. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new complications, new questions about what this relationship meant and where it might lead. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to simply be grateful. Grateful for help freely given. Grateful for a man who valued her kindness enough to protect it. And grateful that sometimes, against all odds and reason, the universe sent exactly what you needed in the most unexpected package. The first week after Marcus paid off her debts passed in a surreal blur. Maya kept expecting something to change, for some hidden condition to emerge, for the other shoe to drop. But nothing changed. Marcus continued to arrive at 3:15 every afternoon, order his black coffee and the daily special, sit quietly by the window watching the river, and leave generous but not excessive tips. Their conversations remained brief and professional, though now weighted with an unspoken understanding that connected them in ways the other cafe patrons couldn't see. Maya's mother called 3 days after the medical bills were paid, her voice trembling with confused relief. "They said it's all taken care of. Every penny." "Maya, what's happening? How did you do this?" The lie came easier the second time. "I had some savings I didn't tell you about. I wanted to help. It wasn't entirely false." She did want to help, had always wanted to help. Had simply never had the means until a billionaire decided to make her problems his own. Her mother wasn't convinced, but she was too exhausted from fighting her illness to push too hard. "You're a good daughter, better than I deserve." "You deserve everything, Mom," Maya said, her throat tight with emotion. "Everything." But as the days passed and the immediate crisis faded, new complications emerged. Maya's co-worker, Jasmine, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who had worked at the Riverside longer than anyone else, started paying closer attention to table 12. "That guy," Jasmine said one afternoon, cornering Maya by the coffee station, "the one who comes every day at the same time. He's been watching you." Maya felt her pulse quicken. "He's just a regular customer." "He's more than that. I've been doing this job for 8 years, Maya. I know what regular customers look like. That man looks at you like you're the reason he walks through that door." Jasmine's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "And you look at him differently than you look at anyone else. So what's really going on?" "Nothing," Maya said too quickly. "We're just friendly. He's nice. That's all done." Single quotes. Jasmine studied her with the kind of knowing expression that came from years of reading people across sticky tables and rushed orders. "If you say so. But be careful, honey. Men who sit alone in cafes every day at the same time are usually running from something or looking for something. Either way, it's complicated." The warning stayed with Maya, adding another layer of uncertainty to a situation already fraught with complications. What was Marcus running from? He had told her about wanting to feel normal, about escaping the demands of his wealth and position. But was there more to it? What did it mean that a man with virtually unlimited resources chose to spend his afternoons in a modest cafe, watching a river flow past, counting down the hours until he could be nobody special again? 2 weeks after Marcus had first revealed his identity, Maya was clearing table 12 after his departure when she found something tucked under his water glass. Not money this time, but a folded piece of paper. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The handwriting was precise, controlled, the words carefully chosen. "There's a benefit gala on Saturday night, Wellington Ashford Industries annual charity event. I have to attend, have to be Marcus Wellington Ashford instead of just Marcus. It will be the first time in 3 months I've had to wear that mask. I find myself dreading it more than usual. This is not an invitation. You have already given me far more than I could ask for. This is simply me telling you that I wish I could spend Saturday evening at table 12 instead of surrounded by people who will smile at me while calculating what I'm worth to them. Thank you for being the antidote to that world, Marcus." Maya read the note 3 times. Her emotions a tangle she couldn't unravel. It wasn't an invitation, he had been careful to make that clear, but it was an intimacy, a sharing of vulnerability that touched her deeply. He was lonely, despite all his wealth and power. Despite the empire he commanded and the influence he wielded, Marcus Wellington Ashford was profoundly, achingly lonely. She pulled out her phone and typed a message to the email address on his card. "You'll be brilliant at the gala. You'll smile and shake hands and say all the right things because that's what you've been trained to do since birth. And then Monday at 3:15 you'll come back to table 12, and I'll bring you black coffee and ask how your weekend was. And you can be just Marcus again. That's not nothing. That's something to look forward to, Maya." His response came within minutes. "You're right, it is something to look forward to. Thank you for reminding me." Saturday arrived with the weight of knowledge Maya wished she didn't have. She worked her shift at the Riverside, going through familiar motions while her mind wandered to a world she could barely imagine. Marcus would be getting ready now, putting on an expensive tuxedo, preparing to navigate rooms full of wealthy donors and social climbers, all of them wanting something from him. She thought about his note, about the weariness in those carefully written words, felt an unexpected surge of protective anger on his behalf. During her break, Maya did something she had been avoiding. She pulled out her phone and searched for Marcus Wellington Ashford. This time she added the full name and the results were overwhelming. Pages and pages of articles, photographs, profiles. She saw him in his other life, dressed in impeccable suits, standing before podiums, shaking hands with presidents and celebrities, always with that same neutral expression that revealed nothing. She found the event he had mentioned, the Wellington Ashford Industries Benefit Gala. The live stream was public, available to anyone who wanted to watch. Maya told herself she wouldn't watch, that it was a violation of the privacy he had sought in the cafe, that it would make their relationship stranger than it already was. But when her shift ended and she returned to her small apartment, she found herself opening the live stream on her laptop. The gala was everything she had expected and more. The venue was stunning, all crystal chandeliers and marble floors, women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos, the kind of wealth on casual display that could feed a neighborhood for a year. Maya watched as the camera panned across the crowd, searching for a face she now knew as well as her own. And then she saw him, Marcus Wellington Ashford, standing at the center of a group of admirers, a champagne flute in his hand, his expression pleasant and engaged. He looked different in his tuxedo, more polished, more intimidating, more like the billionaire he actually was. But Maya could see what others probably couldn't: the tension in his shoulder, the way his smile never quite reached his eyes, the subtle distance he maintained even while seeming to be fully present. She watched as person after person approached him as he navigated conversations with practiced ease, as he delivered what must have been a speech because the crowd applauded and cameras flashed. He was good at this role. Excellent, but it was clearly a role, a performance he had perfected over decades of necessity. At one point, the camera caught him alone for just a moment, standing by a window that overlooked the city, his expression unguarded. In that brief instant, Maya saw the same loneliness she had recognized in the cafe, the same weariness that no amount of champagne and applause could touch. She wanted absurdly to reach through the screen and tell him it was okay, that Monday was coming, that table 12 would be waiting. The live stream cut to an interview segment. A polished reporter with perfect teeth cornered Marcus near the bar. Wellington Ashford, your company's philanthropic work is legendary, but our viewers would love to know more about Marcus the man. What do you do when you're not running a global empire? How does someone like you relax? Maya leaned forward, curious to hear how he would answer. Marcus's expression remained neutral, professional. I keep a fairly low profile in my personal time. I've found that the best way to recharge is often the simplest. A good book, a quiet space, the basics. No hobbies, no secret passions. The reporter pressed, hungry for something more substantial than platitudes. I suppose my secret passion is normalcy, Marcus said, and Maya heard the truth hidden in the deflection. In a life that's anything but normal, finding moments of ordinary human connection becomes extraordinarily valuable. The reporter laughed, thinking it was a clever non-answer, and moved on to questions about quarterly earnings and market projections. But Maya understood what he had really said. He was talking about the cafe, about table 12. About her. The realization made her chest tight with an emotion she couldn't quite name. She closed the laptop and sat in the darkness of her apartment, processing what she had witnessed. Marcus Wellington Ashford was powerful and wealthy and influential, but he was also trapped by expectations and obligations, by the weight of a legacy he hadn't chosen, by the isolation that came from being seen as a resource rather than a person. Her problems had been concrete, debts with specific dollar amounts that could be solved with money. His problems were existential, the kind that all the money in the world couldn't fix. Monday arrived with a strange sense of anticipation. Maya found herself watching the clock more than usual, counting down the minutes until 3:15. When Marcus finally walked through the door, their eyes met across the cafe and she saw relief flood his features. He looked tired, as if the gala had drained something essential from him, but his pace quickened slightly as he made his way to table 12. Maya gave him a moment to settle before approaching. Good afternoon. The usual? Please. His voice was rough, strained, then quieter. Thank you for your message. It helped. More than you know. She wanted to tell him she had watched the live stream, had seen him navigating that glittering world, had recognized the loneliness beneath the polish, but that felt like an invasion, an acknowledgement that she had witnessed the performance he worked so hard to leave behind when he walked through the cafe doors. Instead, she simply said, "How was your weekend?" Marcus's expression softened, gratitude evident in his eyes. Long, exhausting, full of people who wanted to tell me things I didn't want to hear and ask questions I didn't want to answer. But it's Monday now, and I'm exactly where I want to be. I'll get your coffee. As Maya walked back to the counter, she felt the weight of Jasmine's earlier warning pressing on her. Her coworker had been right. This was complicated. Marcus was running from something. His own life, his own identity, the burden of being Marcus Wellington Ashford instead of just Marcus. And she, in her small way, had become his refuge from that burden. The question was whether that refuge could last, because secrets, especially secrets as big as the one they were sharing, had a way of coming to light. And when they did, the consequences rarely fell equally on everyone involved. Marcus had billions of dollars and teams of people to protect him. Maya had tips and paychecks and a life that could be appended by association with scandal. But as she brought him his coffee and saw the genuine peace that settled over his features as he took that first sip, as he said, "Thank you, Maya," with a warmth that made her name sound like something precious, she found herself willing to accept the risk, because some connections transcended logic and self-preservation. Some moments of human understanding were worth protecting, even when the odds of keeping them safe seemed impossibly small. Marcus had given her freedom from debt, from the crushing weight of problems that had no solution. In return, she was giving him something equally valuable, permission to be ordinary, to be seen without calculation, to exist for a few hours each day as nothing more than a man who liked his coffee black and his conversations simple. It was a fair trade, even if the world would never understand it. 3 weeks into their new understanding, the careful balance they had established began to show cracks. The first fissure appeared on a Wednesday afternoon when Maya was taking Marcus's order. A man in an expensive suit, someone she didn't recognize but who carried the unmistakable air of corporate authority, walked into the cafe and stopped dead when he saw Marcus sitting at table 12. Maya watched the man's face cycle through confusion, recognition, and something that looked like alarm. He approached their table with quick, purposeful steps, his phone already in his hand. "Marcus, what are you doing here?" The man's tone carried a mix of relief and reproach. "We've been trying to reach you for 2 hours. The Yamamoto deal is falling apart. They're threatening to walk unless you personally guarantee the terms." Marcus's expression shifted, the peaceful contentment draining away, replaced by weary resignation. "Richard, I'm on my afternoon break, as I've told the office repeatedly. This time is not to be interrupted unless someone is literally dying." "The deal is dying," Richard pressed, apparently unbothered by the public setting or Maya's presence. "That's a $3 billion contract, Marcus. You need to call Yamamoto now." Maya felt like an intruder witnessing something intimate and uncomfortable. She started to step back to give them privacy, but Marcus's hand moved slightly, a subtle gesture that asked her to stay. "Give me 10 minutes, Marcus said, his voice taking on the authoritative edge Maya had never heard before. "Wait outside. I'll handle it." Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but something in Marcus's tone made him reconsider. He nodded curtly, shot Maya a dismissive glance that made her feel like furniture, and retreated to wait near the door. The silence that followed was heavy with broken illusions. Marcus stared at his untouched coffee, his jaw tight with frustration. "I'm sorry you had to see that." "It's okay," Maya said, though it wasn't really. The intrusion had shattered the careful bubble they had constructed, reminded them both that his other life was always just outside the door, waiting to reclaim him. "This is what it's like," Marcus said quietly. "Every hour of every day, someone always needs something. A decision, a signature, a phone call that will make or break millions of dollars. And I'm expected to be available, always performing, always on, because that's what it means to be Marcus Wellington Ashford." Maya heard the bitterness in his voice, the exhaustion that went bone deep. "You should probably go handle that." "I should." He looked up at her and she saw frustration and sadness warring in his expression. "Don't want to. I want to sit here and drink my coffee and pretend that $3 billion doesn't hang in the balance. I want to be a person, not a signature on a contract." "Maybe you could be both," Maya offered gently. "Handle the crisis, save the deal, and then come back tomorrow at 3:15. I'll still be here." Something in his face softened. "You'll always know what to say." "I really don't," Maya admitted. "I'm making this up as I go along." Marcus stood, leaving bills on the table as always. "Keep the coffee warm for me. I'll be back as soon as I can." He walked out with Richard, and Maya watched through the window as they stood on the sidewalk. Marcus already on his phone, his posture transforming from the relaxed regular customer into the commanding CEO who made billion-dollar decisions. The man who had sat at table 12 felt like a different person from the one conducting business on the street, and Maya understood with sudden clarity just how much energy it took for him to maintain both identities. The incident troubled her more than she wanted to admit. She had gotten used to their routine, had begun to think of it as sustainable, something that could continue indefinitely. But Richard's intrusion reminded her that Marcus's escape to the riverside was borrowed time, that his real life was always waiting to reassert itself, to pull him back into a world where she didn't exist except as the waitress who brought him coffee. That evening, after her shift ended, Maya found herself walking past the towering glass building that housed Wellington Ashford Industries headquarters. She had looked up the address, curious to see where Marcus spent his other hours, the ones not devoted to quiet refuge at table 12. The building was impressive in an intimidating way, all steel and glass reaching toward the sky, a monument to wealth and power that made her feel small just looking at it. She stood on the sidewalk across the street, staring up at the illuminated windows. Somewhere in that building, Marcus was probably still working, handling the crisis that had interrupted his afternoon. She wondered which window was his, whether he ever looked out and thought about the cafe by the river, about the life he was pretending to live during those few precious hours each day. "You looking for someone?" A security guard had appeared beside her, his tone professional but wary. "No, sorry. Just admiring the architecture," Maya said, feeling foolish. She walked away quickly, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. What was she doing standing outside his office like some kind of stalker? This wasn't her world. She didn't belong here any more than Marcus truly belonged at the riverside. The next day, Marcus didn't show up at 3:15 or 3:30 or 4 o'clock. Maya tried not to watch the door, tried to focus on her other customer, but she felt his absence like a missing tooth, her tongue constantly returning to the empty space. Had yesterday's interruption changed things? Had he decided the refuge wasn't worth the complication? Or was he simply dealing with more crises, trapped in meetings and phone calls that stretched through the afternoon? At 4:30, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Still trapped in meeting. Won't make it today. I'm sorry. Tomorrow for sure." Relief and disappointment mixed in equal measure. He hadn't forgotten, hadn't abandoned their routine, but the easy certainty of his daily appearance had been broken, and Maya felt the fragility of what they had built. Jasmine noticed, of course. "Your 3:15 regular didn't show." He had work obligations, Maya said, trying to sound casual. Must be important work to miss his daily coffee. Jasmine's tone was carefully neutral, but her eyes were sharp with curiosity. You know what he does? Consulting, Maya lied smoothly. He travels for work sometimes. Jasmine didn't sound convinced, but let it drop. That evening, Maya received an email from Marcus. No subject line, just a message that felt like it had been written in stolen moments between obligations. Today was brutal. 8 hours of meetings, all of them necessary, none of them fulfilling. I kept thinking about table 12, about the coffee getting cold, about missing the one appointment that actually matters to me. This is the reality of my life, Maya. Days like today where the weight of responsibility makes it impossible to do the things that keep me human. I don't know how to fix that. I just know that knowing you're there, that table 12 will be waiting tomorrow, is the only thing that made today bearable. Thank you for that, even when I can't be there. Knowing I could be is enough. Marcus. Maya read the email 3 times, her heart aching for him. She understood what he wasn't saying, that the pressure was mounting, that maintaining his secret life at the cafe was becoming harder, that eventually something would have to give. She wrote back, keeping her message simple and honest. Tomorrow at 3:15, table 12 will be ready. Your coffee will be hot, and I'll be here to say hello. That's a promise, Maya. The next day, he arrived exactly at 3:15, and the relief on his face when he walked through the door made Maya's chest tight. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes suggesting he hadn't slept well. But when she approached with her notepad and her welcoming smile, some of the tension drained from his shoulder. The usual? Please. And Maya, thank you for yesterday, for understanding. It's what friends do, she said, and then immediately wondered if she had overstepped. Were they friends? Could a billionaire and a waitress be friends? Did their unusual arrangement even have a name? But Marcus smiled, genuine warmth flooding his features. Friends, yes, I'd like that. As Maya walked away to place his order, she felt something shift in their dynamic. They had moved past the simple transactional relationship of customer and server, past the benefactor and beneficiary arrangement that had initially defined their connection. They were becoming something else, something more complicated and more valuable. Friends who existed in the liminal space between two very different worlds, who understood each other's loneliness because they had learned to recognize it in themselves. But friendship brought its own complications. Friends cared about each other, worried about each other, wanted to help each other, and Maya was starting to realize that while Marcus had solved her financial problems with ease, she had no idea how to help him with his. She couldn't give him freedom from his responsibilities or relief from the constant demands on his time and energy. She could only offer him a few hours each day at table 12, a pocket of normalcy and a life that was anything but normal. Was that enough? Would it continue to be enough as the pressures of his real life increased? And what would happen when, inevitably, their arrangement was discovered? Because secrets always came to light eventually, and when this one did, the fallout would not be equal. Marcus had the resources and power to weather any scandal. Maya had only her reputation and her job, both of which could be destroyed by association with a billionaire who had been secretly spending his afternoons in her cafe. These thoughts troubled her through the rest of her shift and followed her home that evening. She wanted to believe that what they had was sustainable, that their friendship could continue indefinitely without consequences. But the intrusion by Richard had shown her the truth. Marcus's two worlds were on a collision course, and she was standing right in the impact zone. That night, Maya made a decision. If this friendship was going to survive, if their arrangement was going to last, they needed to be honest about the risks. They needed to acknowledge the complications and plan for the inevitable moment when their secret was exposed, because it wasn't a question of if anymore. It was only a question of when. The next afternoon, when Marcus finished his coffee and prepared to leave, Maya did something she had never done before. She slipped a note under his coffee cup, hidden from view but positioned where he would find it. The message was brief but direct. We need to talk, really talk, about what happens when your two worlds collide. Because they will. And when they do, I need to know you have a plan. She watched from across the cafe as he found the note, saw him read it, saw the understanding and concern flash across his face. He looked up, met her eyes across the room, and nodded once. Acknowledgement, an agreement. Tomorrow they would have that conversation. Tomorrow they would face the reality they had been avoiding. But today, for one more afternoon, table 12 remained a refuge where a billionaire could be just Marcus and a waitress could be simply Maya. And the complicated truths of their impossible friendship could wait just a little bit longer. They met by the river again. After Maya's shift ended, the same bench where Marcus had first revealed his identity. The evening was cooler now, autumn asserting itself with crisp air and leaves beginning to turn gold and crimson. Marcus was already there when Maya arrived, his posture tense, hands clasped between his knees as he stared at the water flowing past. "Thank you for agreeing to this," Maya said, sitting down but maintaining a careful distance. "Your note was right," Marcus replied, not looking at her. "We've been pretending the bubble wouldn't burst." But Richard walking into the cafe proved that was naive. "My world has a way of finding me no matter where I hide." Maya pulled her jacket tighter against the evening chill. "I need to understand what happens when this comes out. When someone recognizes you, when the media finds out you've been spending your afternoons in a modest cafe, when people start asking questions about why a billionaire has been meeting regularly with a waitress. Because they will ask those questions, Marcus. and the answers they invent will be ugly. He finally turned to look at her, and she saw the weight of consideration in his eyes. He had clearly been thinking about this too. They'll assume we're having an affair, that I'm taking advantage of you, that you're using me for money. The truth that we're simply two lonely people who found unexpected friendship in each other won't make sense to them. It's too simple, too pure for a world that sees everything through the lens of transaction and exploitation. So what do we do? Maya asked, her voice steady despite the fear curling in her stomach. Do we stop? Do you find somewhere else to hide and I go back to serving customers who don't see me? Do we end this before it becomes a problem? Is that what you want? The question came out rougher than he probably intended, weighted with an emotion Maya didn't dare name. No, she admitted. These afternoons have become important to me too. You're the first person in years who has asked how I am and actually waited to hear the answer. You see me as a person, not just as a function. That matters more than I knew something could matter. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the river. When he spoke, his voice carried the careful precision of someone who had been rehearsing these words. I can protect you. I have the resources to manage media narratives, to shut down speculation before it becomes scandal. I can hire the best crisis management team in the world. But that kind of protection comes with its own complications. It means pulling you into my world, putting you in the spotlight you've been avoiding, making you part of the machinery I've been trying to escape. What about just telling the truth? Maya suggested. What if we get ahead of it? Admit that we're friends, that you've been coming to the cafe because you value normalcy, that I've appreciated your kindness. No lies, no cover stories, just the honest reality of an unusual friendship. The truth has never protected anyone from speculation, Marcus said with bitter knowledge. They'll twist it regardless. But you're right, that controlling the narrative from the start is better than letting others define it for us. He turned to face her fully. Maya, if we do this, if we decide to keep meeting and risk the exposure, I need you to understand the scrutiny you'll face. Your life will be examined. Reporters will dig into your history, your family, your finances. They'll find the payments I made, and they'll use that as proof of impropriety, no matter how innocent the truth is. Maya felt cold dread settle in her chest. She hadn't thought about that aspect, about how the very help he had given her would be weaponized against them both. My brother, my mother, they'll be dragged into this. Yes, Marcus confirmed, not sugarcoating the reality. Everyone connected to you becomes part of the story. That's the cost of association with someone like me. It's why most of my relationships are transactional. Why the people around me are professionals bound by contracts and NDA. Real friendship, genuine connection. It's almost impossible when you carry this much visibility. The unfairness of it struck Maya like a physical blow, that someone could be punished simply for being kind, for seeking connection, for trying to be human beyond their bank account. But she also understood that this was Marcus's reality. Had always been his reality and would continue to be his reality regardless of whether she was part of his life or not. There's another option, she said slowly, an idea forming as she spoke. What if you're not the one who's hiding? What if I'm someone legitimate in your life? Not romantically, she added quickly, seeing his expression shift, but professionally. You run charitable foundations, right? You mentioned the benefit gala. What if I become part of that work? A consultant, an advisor, someone who helps you understand the perspective of the people your charity is supposed to serve. It gives us a legitimate reason to meet, to spend time together, and it's close enough to the truth that we don't have to lie. Marcus stared at her, something like admiration flickering across his face. That's actually brilliant. It provides cover and serves a genuine purpose. Most people who run charitable foundations have no real understanding of poverty or struggle. They make decisions based on spreadsheets and grant proposals, never connecting with the human reality their money is supposed to address. You could actually be invaluable in that capacity. So we make it official, Maya continued, warming to the idea. You hire me as a poverty consultant or community liaison or whatever title makes sense. I keep my job at the cafe because I need the income and the health insurance, but I also work for your foundation. It explains our relationship, protects us both from speculation, and actually accomplishes something meaningful. It would mean coming to meetings at my office, Marcus warned, attending some foundation events, being photographed occasionally. You'd need to be comfortable with that level of visibility. Maya thought about the imposing glass building she had stood outside of, feeling so small and out of place. The idea of walking into that building, of sitting in meetings with people who casually discussed millions of dollars was terrifying. But so was the alternative of losing this friendship, of going back to a life where nobody saw her as anything more than a waitress who brought coffee and smiled on command. I can handle it, she said, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. Marcus pulled out his phone and made a note. I'll have my HR department draw up a contract. Standard employment agreement, reasonable salary, benefits, the works. This needs to be completely legitimate by the book, so there's no appearance of impropriety. You'll actually be working, actually providing value. This isn't a cover story. This is real. How much? Maya asked, suddenly anxious. The salary, I mean. It can't be too much or it looks suspicious. But it can't be too little or it's obviously fake. Consultants with lived experience in poverty and community work typically earn between $60,000 and $80,000 annually, Marcus said, his tone businesslike. I'll start you at 70 with performance reviews and potential raises. That's competitive and justifiable. $70,000. More than double what she made at the cafe. Enough to truly breathe, to save, to think about a future beyond survival. But also enough to fundamentally change her life in ways she wasn't sure she was ready. This is really happening, she said, half to herself. Only if you wanted to, Marcus replied gently. I'm offering this because it solves a problem for both of us. But if you'd prefer to keep things as they are and risk the exposure, I'll respect that. If you'd prefer to end our friendship now before things get more complicated, I'll understand that too. This is your choice, Maya. I have enough money and power to weather any storm. You don't, so you get to decide. Maya appreciated that he was giving her control, acknowledging the imbalance between them. But she also knew that walking away now would be cowardice, would be letting fear win over the genuine connection they had built. And the consultant position wasn't just protection. It was an opportunity to actually make a difference, to use her experience to help others struggling with the same problems that had nearly drowned her. I want to do this, she said firmly, not just as cover, but because it matters, because I know what it's like to be on the receiving end of charity that doesn't understand the reality of being poor. I can help make your foundations work better, more effective, more human. That's worth the risk. Relief and respect mingled in Marcus's expression. Then we have a deal. I'll have the paperwork ready by next week. In the meantime, we continue as we have been. Me at table 12, you're bringing coffee, pretending for a little while longer that we're just a regular customer and a friendly waitress. See you tomorrow, Sir, Maya said, and they both smiled at the phrase that had started everything. But as Maya walked home that evening, she felt the weight of what they had decided. Their simple friendship was about to become complicated, professional, scrutinized. They were choosing to step out of the shadows and into a light that would examine every aspect of their relationship. It was the right choice, the smart choice, but it was also terrifying. She thought about her mother, her brother, about how their lives would change once this became public knowledge. She would need to talk to them, prepare them for what was coming. She would need to be ready for the questions of the judgment, the inevitable speculation that would follow her despite every precaution they took. But she also thought about Marcus, about the loneliness in his eyes when Richard had interrupted their afternoon, about the weight he carried every day that no amount of money could ease. If she could give him genuine friendship while also doing meaningful work, wasn't that worth the complications? Wasn't that worth the risk? Tomorrow, Marcus would arrive at 3:15. She would bring him black coffee and the daily special. They would maintain their careful routine for a little while longer. But soon, very soon, everything would change. The waitress and the billionaire would step into the light together, and they would face whatever came with the knowledge that at least they weren't facing it alone. The contract arrived exactly 1 week later, delivered by courier to Maya's apartment in a crisp manila envelope embossed with the Wellington Ashford Industries logo. She sat at her tiny kitchen table, the pages spread before her, reading through language that felt like it belonged in a different universe. Employment agreement. Consultant for community outreach and poverty policy. Annual salary of $70,000. Benefits including health insurance, retirement contributions, and professional development fund. It was surreal seeing her name, Maya Chun, typed in official font next to Marcus Wellington Ashford's signature line. Her mother called while she was still staring at the papers, trying to convince herself this was real. Maya, honey, I haven't heard from you in a few days. Is everything all right? Maya took a breath, knowing this conversation couldn't be delayed any longer. Mom, something's happened. Something good, but also complicated. Can we meet for coffee? I need to explain in person. There was a pause. The kind of worried silence only a mother could produce. You're scaring me. Just tell me you're okay. I'm more than okay. I promise. But this needs to be a face-to-face conversation. They met the next morning at a small cafe near her mother's apartment, not the riverside. Maya needed neutral ground for this discussion, somewhere without the weight of association. Her mother looked better than she had in months. The medical treatments finally showing results, color returning to her cheeks. The relief of having her bills paid had lifted a visible burden, and seeing her healthier made Maya more certain that accepting Marcus's help had been the right choice. So, her mother said once they had their coffee, her eyes sharp with maternal concern. What's this about? Maya explained everything. The quiet regular customer who had noticed her struggle, the revelation of his identity, the offer of help and her decision to accept it, the job offer that had emerged from their unusual friendship. She left nothing out, knowing that half-truths would only make things worse when the full story inevitably emerged. Her mother listened without interrupting, her expression cycling through disbelief, concern, and something that might have been understanding. When Maya finished, silence stretched between them for a long moment. A billionaire, her mother finally said. You've been friends with a billionaire for months and you didn't tell me. I didn't know how. I was afraid you'd think I was being naive or reckless, and I was protecting his privacy. He needed that cafe to be a safe space, and now you're going to work for him. With him, Maya corrected gently. This isn't charity, Mom. This is a real job doing real work. He needs someone who understands poverty from the inside, who can help his foundation make better decisions about where money goes and how it's used. I can do that. I'm qualified by experience, if nothing else. Her mother reached across the table and took Maya's hand. I'm not angry, sweetheart. I'm worried. Men with that kind of power, they operate by different rules. Even good men, and he might be a good man, they live in a world where people are resources to be managed. You could get hurt. I know the risks, Maya said. We've talked about them. That's why we're making this official, documented, completely legitimate. I'm protecting myself by making this public and professional. And what about your heart? Her mother asked softly. Because the way you talk about him, Maya, it's not just friendship I'm hearing. The observation struck deeper than Maya wanted to admit. She had been carefully not examining her feelings for Marcus beyond the boundaries of friendship, deliberately avoiding the question of whether her concern for him crossed into territory more complicated. It's not like that. We're friends. Different circumstances, different worlds, but genuine friends. Her mother's expression suggested she didn't entirely believe that, but she squeezed Maya's hand supportively. Just be careful. And keep me informed this time. No more secrets that leave me finding out months later that my daughter's been having coffee with one of the richest men in the world. Maya laughed, relieved that her mother was taking this as well as could be expected. Deal. No more secrets. But even as she made that promise, Maya knew there were some truths she was still hiding, even from herself. The following Monday, Maya walked through the imposing glass doors of Wellington Ashford Industries for the first time as an employee. The lobby was stunning. All soaring ceilings and modern art, the kind of space designed to intimidate and impress in equal measure. She wore her best outfit, a simple but professional dress she had splurged on from a department store. Her hair pulled back neatly, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Security checked her name against a list, issued her a temporary badge, and directed her to the 42nd floor. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor ticking past like seconds on a countdown to some unknown destination. When the doors finally opened, she stepped into a reception area that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel. All sleek furniture and muted elegance. Ms. Chun, a polished woman in her 30s, approached with an extended hand. I'm Victoria Reeves, director of the Wellington Ashford Foundation. Marcus asked me to meet with you first. Get you oriented before he joins us. Maya shook her hand, noting the appraising look Victoria gave her. The subtle assessment happening behind professional courtesy. Thank you for meeting with me, of course. We're excited to have someone with your perspective on the team. The words were friendly, but Victoria's tone carried an undercurrent Maya couldn't quite read. Skepticism, curiosity, suspicion. They spent the next hour in a conference room, Victoria walking Maya through the foundation's current initiatives, the grants they funded, the communities they serve. It was impressive work on paper, millions of dollars flowing to programs addressing homelessness, food insecurity, education gaps. But as Victoria talked, Maya began to notice the disconnect she and Marcus had discussed. Everything was measured in metrics and outcomes, in percentages and performance indicators. The actual humans supposedly being helped were abstractions, numbers on spreadsheets rather than people with stories and struggle. We've recently approved a grant for a job training program, Victoria said, pulling up a presentation on the large screen. It provides resume workshops and interview skills to unemployed individuals in low-income neighborhoods. Very promising outcomes in their pilot program. Maya looked at the presentation, seeing immediately what was missing. Does the program provide childcare during the training sessions? Transportation assistance? Because if someone's working two jobs just to keep a roof over their head, they can't afford to lose shifts to attend a workshop, even if it might help them long term. And if they have kids and no one to watch them, they can't attend at all. Victoria blinked, clearly not having considered these factors. I am not sure. That information isn't in the grant proposal. It should be, Maya said gently. The best job training in the world is useless if the people who most need it can't actually access it. These programs often assume a level of flexibility and resources that poor people simply don't have. A voice from the doorway made them both turn. That's exactly why you're here. Marcus stood in the entrance, dressed in one of his impeccable suits, looking every inch the billionaire CEO, but his eyes, when they met Maya's, carried warmth that belied the formal setting. Miss Chun is going to help us ask the questions we've been missing, Victoria. The practical, on-the-ground questions that make the difference between programs that look good on paper and programs that actually change lives. Victoria's expression shifted, recognition dawning. This wasn't just a diversity hire or a box-checking exercise. Marcus was serious about Maya's role, about the perspective she brought. That's valuable feedback, Ms. Chun. Thank you. I'll reach out to the grant recipients and get answers about childcare and transportation. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing other programs, and with each one, Maya found gaps and assumptions that revealed how divorced the foundation's work was from the reality of poverty. Not through malice or indifference, but simply through the blindness that came from never having experienced it themselves. Marcus listened intently, taking notes, occasionally asking questions that showed he was truly hearing what she was saying. When Victoria finally excused herself for another meeting, Marcus and Maya were left alone in the conference room. The dynamic between them felt different here, in his world, in his building. He was more formal, more guarded, though his smile when he looked at her remained genuine. You were brilliant, he said. Every observation you made was something we should have been asking from the beginning. You're going to transform how we work. I'm glad I can help, Maya replied. But this is strange being here, seeing you like this. You seem different. I am different here, Marcus admitted. This is the performance I mentioned. Marcus Wellington, Ashford, CEO, philanthropist, the role I've been playing my whole life. It's necessary, but it's exhausting. Will I see you at the cafe later? Maya asked, suddenly needing the reassurance that their routine would continue, that this professional relationship wouldn't completely replace what they had built at table 12. 3:15, Marcus confirmed. Same as always. That doesn't change, Maya. No matter what happens in this building, table 12 is still ours. But even as he said it, Maya noticed something in his expression, a tension that suggested he wasn't as certain as he wanted her to believe. She was about to ask about it when his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and his face went carefully neutral, the kind of blank expression that meant bad news. What is it? A message from my head of security. Someone's been asking questions. A reporter from a business magazine. They've been interviewing people at the Riverside, asking about my visits there, about whether I'd been meeting anyone regularly. Marcus looked up at her and she saw genuine concern in his eyes. It's starting, Maya. The exposure we knew was coming. It's here. Maya felt her stomach drop. They had prepared for this, had created a legitimate cover story, had done everything right, but knowing intellectually that scrutiny was coming and feeling the reality of it were two very different things. What do we do? Marcus's expression hardened with resolve. We get ahead of it. We release our own statement before they can spin their narrative. We announce your hire to the foundation, emphasize the important work you'll be doing, and we frame this story our way. He paused. But Maya, this is your last chance to walk away. Once we go public, there's no taking it back. The media will descend. Your life will change. Are you ready for that? Maya thought about her mother's warning, about Jasmine's observation that Marcus was more than just a regular customer, about all the ways this could go wrong. But she also thought about the job training program that didn't account for child, about the millions of dollars being spent on programs that missed the mark because nobody had thought to ask the right questions, about the difference she could make if she was brave enough to step forward. I'm ready, she said. Let's tell our story before someone else does. The press release went out at 9 in the morning, carefully worded by Marcus's communications team to emphasize the professional nature of Maya's hire while highlighting the innovative approach the Wellington Ashford Foundation was taking by bringing on a consultant with lived experience of poverty. It included quotes from Marcus about the importance of centering the voices of those the foundation serve, and a brief professional biography of Maya that managed to make her life sound accomplished rather than desperate. By 10 o'clock, Maya's phone had exploded with notifications. Text messages from friends she hadn't heard from in years, emails from reporters requesting interviews, social media mentions from people she had never met. The story had been picked up by every major business outlet and was spreading across the internet like wildfire. Billionaire CEO hires Waitress as foundation consultant. Wellington Ashford finds poverty expert in coffee shop. The headlines ranged from genuinely interested to barely concealed skepticism. Maya sat in her apartment, watching her carefully constructed normal life disintegrate in real time. Her social media accounts, which she had always kept private and minimal, were being dissected by strangers. Someone had found her high school yearbook photo and posted it with commentary about her transformation. A think piece appeared within hours questioning whether this was genuine progressive leadership or performative poverty tourism. Comments sections were brutal, split between people who saw this as inspiring and those who saw it as a billionaire's latest publicity stunt. Her phone rang. Marcus. She answered immediately, grateful for the familiar voice amid the chaos. How are you holding up? Maya laughed, a slightly hysterical sound. I've been tagged in 17 different social media posts in the last hour. A reporter from a financial news network is camped outside my building. Someone posted my exact salary with commentary about whether I'm worth it, so, Great, I'm sorry. Marcus's voice carried genuine regret. I knew it would be intense, but I don't think either of us fully understood just how intense. Have security available if you need it. They can make sure the reporters outside your building keep their distance. Security. Maya repeated the word like it belonged to a foreign language. I need security now. This is insane, Marcus, I know. And I'm sorry I dragged you into this, but Maya, you need to know the foundation board met this morning. They reviewed your initial assessments from yesterday's meeting. They were impressed, really impressed. Victoria called me after the meeting to say you identified issues in 15 minutes that we had missed in months of review. This isn't just optics. You're already making a difference. The validation helped, but it didn't stop the anxiety clawing at her chest. What about the cafe? I'm supposed to work a shift this afternoon. Do I just show up and pretend everything's normal while reporters follow me around asking questions? Marcus was quiet for a moment. That's your decision. I can have my team coordinate with the cafe's management, ensure you have space to work without harassment. Or you could take a few days off, let the initial frenzy die down before going back. Maya thought about the Riverside, about table 12, about the routine that had become her anchor. She thought about Jasmine and the other staff who were probably dealing with their own versions of this chaos. I can't hide. That makes me look guilty of something. I need to show up, do my job, Prove that this isn't going to change who I am. Then I'll make sure you're protected while you do it, Marcus promised. The Riverside Cafe at 2 in the afternoon was unlike anything Maya had experienced in her years working there. 2 security personnel flanked the entrance, politely but firmly keeping reporters at a distance. Inside, the atmosphere was charged with an energy that felt equal parts excitement and tension. Customers who had been regulars for years suddenly looked at her with new interest, their gazes following her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. Jasmine cornered her the moment she walked in. "Girl, we need to talk." They stepped into the staff area, away from curious eyes and ears. Jasmine's expression was complex, mixing concern with something that might have been hurt. "You've been friends with Marcus Wellington Ashford this whole time and didn't tell anyone?" "I couldn't," Maya said. "It wasn't my secret to tell. He needed privacy. Needed a place to just be normal. I was protecting that." "And the job? The $70,000 consultant position?" "Maya, people are saying ugly things about what you had to do to get that job." The words stung, even though Maya had expected them. "People who don't know me, who don't know him, who are making assumptions based on their own cynicism. The job is real, Jasmine. I earned it by understanding something he needed to understand. That's all." Jasmine studied her for a long moment, then her expression softened. "I believe you. I've watched you two together. It wasn't romantic or transactional. It was just 2 lonely people finding something human in each other. But you need to know, management is getting pressure. Reporters want to interview staff, want to know details about his visits here. Some customers are coming just to see the place where the story happened. It's turned into a circus." Maya felt guilt wash over her. This was exactly what she had feared. That her association with Marcus would create problems for people who had done nothing but show up and do their jobs. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted this to affect everyone else." "Don't apologize. Just be prepared. It's going to be weird for a while." Weird was an understatement. Maya's shift felt like performing in a fishbowl. Customers watched her more than usual, some with friendly curiosity, others with the kind of speculative interest that made her uncomfortable. She caught snippets of conversation, people discussing the story, debating whether it was inspiring or suspicious. A few customers were openly supportive, leaving larger tips than usual with notes of encouragement. Others were coldly judgmental, their disapproval evident in tight-lipped silence and minimal eye contact. At 3:15, the cafe went quiet. Everyone knew he was supposed to come. Everyone was watching to see if he would show up now that their secret was public. Maya held her breath, not entirely sure herself whether Marcus would maintain their routine now that it served no purpose beyond genuine connection. The door opened. Marcus walked in. He was dressed casually, the same unremarkable clothes he always wore to the cafe, but his entrance felt different now that everyone knew who he was. Customers stared openly. Someone's phone camera flashed. Marcus ignored it all, walking with his usual unhurried pace to table 12. He sat down, picked up the menu even though he never needed it, and waited. Maya approached with her notepad, her heart pounding, aware that everyone in the cafe was watching this interaction. "The usual?" Marcus looked up at her, and the warmth in his eyes cut through all the noise and scrutiny. "Please. And Maya, thank you for showing up today, for not letting them turn this into something it isn't. 3:15 is sacred," she said quietly. "A few reporters and nosy customers aren't going to change that." She brought him his coffee and sandwich, and for a moment everything felt normal again. Marcus sat by the window watching the river, lost in his own thoughts. The other customers eventually returned to their own conversations. The cafe breathed out, the tension easing slightly, but normal was an illusion Maya couldn't maintain. Her phone continued to buzz throughout her shift with interview requests and social media notifications. A prominent blogger wrote a long analysis of power dynamics in their relationship that was both sympathetic and deeply uncomfortable to read. A video essay appeared on YouTube examining every public photograph of Marcus from the past 6 months, claiming to trace his visits to the cafe through subtle background details. When her shift ended and Marcus prepared to leave, he paused at the counter where she was reconciling receipts. "There's a foundation board meeting tomorrow. They want you there. They want to hear more of your insights. Want to start restructuring some of our grant programs based on your feedback. This is your chance to prove that you belong in that room, that this hire was about merit, not optics." "I'll be there," Maya said, her voice steadier than she felt. "And Maya, the media storm will pass. It always does. Something else will capture their attention and will fade back into obscurity. You just have to weather the initial assault." But as Marcus left and Maya finished her shift, she wasn't sure she believed him. Some stories had staying power. Some narratives, once established, were impossible to escape. She had become part of Marcus Wellington Ashford's story now, and his story was the kind that people never stopped telling. That evening, Maya's mother called again, her voice tight with concern. "I had reporters at my door today, asking about you, about our family, about the medical bills that were mysteriously paid off. I didn't tell them anything, but Maya, they're digging. They're looking for dirt." "There is no dirt," Maya said, but even as she spoke, she wondered if that mattered. People who wanted to find scandal would invent it if necessary, would twist innocent facts into incriminating narratives. "Just be careful, sweetheart. These people, they don't care about the truth. They care about the story that sells." After hanging up, Maya sat in her apartment with the lights off, looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Marcus was in his penthouse, probably dealing with his own version of this chaos. She wondered if he was second-guessing his decision to help her, to hire her, to pull her into his complicated life. She wondered if the refuge they had found in each other was strong enough to survive being exposed to harsh light. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from Marcus. "Tomorrow, after the board meeting, let's meet at the river, our bench. I think we both need to talk through how we're handling this. You're not alone in this storm, Maya. Remember that." The message steadied something in her that had been threatening to spiral. He was right. They were in this together now, for better or worse. And maybe that was enough. Maybe having someone who understood, who shared the burden of scrutiny, was worth all the chaos that came with it. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new judgments, new tests of whether their unusual friendship could survive in the unforgiving spotlight. But tonight, Maya allowed herself to believe what Marcus had told her. The storm would pass, and when it did, Table 12 would still be waiting, a small pocket of normal in a world that had suddenly become very complicated indeed. The Wellington Ashford Foundation board meeting took place in a conference room that seemed designed to intimidate. 20-foot ceilings, a table that could seat 30 people, original artwork on the walls that probably cost more than most houses. Maya sat in a chair that felt too large, surrounded by people whose net worth collectively probably exceeded some small nation's GDP. Board members, all impeccably dressed, all carrying that particular confidence that came from never having worried about money, watched her with expressions ranging from curious to openly skeptical. Marcus sat at the head of the table, looking every inch the commanding CEO. But when their eyes met briefly, Maya saw encouragement there, a silent reminder that she belonged in this room just as much as anyone else. Victoria sat to his right, her tablet open, ready to take notes. "Ladies and gentlemen," Marcus began, "as you know, we've brought on Miss Chun as a consultant to help us ensure our foundation's work is truly serving the communities we aim to help. Her perspective has already proved invaluable in identifying gaps in our current program. Maya, would you walk the board through your initial findings?" All eyes turned to her. Maya took a breath, pushing down the instinct to make herself smaller, less threatening. She thought about her mother working 3 jobs, about her brother nearly losing his education, about every person she had ever known who had been ground down by systems that claimed to help but didn't understand. She thought about why she was really here, and the nervousness transformed into purpose. "Thank you, Marcus. I've reviewed 15 of the Foundation's current grant program, and I've identified a consistent pattern. These programs are designed by people who have never been poor for people who are. That creates a fundamental disconnect." She pulled up a presentation on the large screen, grateful that Victoria had helped her prepare it the night before. "Take your job training initiative. Excellent curriculum, qualified instructors, proven results for participants who complete it. But the completion rate is only 38%. Do you know why?" A board member, an older man with silver hair and an expensive suit, leaned forward. "Lack of commitment? Competing priorities? The program runs Monday through Friday 9 to 5 for 6 weeks, Maya said. If you're poor and working multiple jobs to survive, you can't afford to give up 6 weeks of income to attend training, even if that training might lead to better opportunities. The program doesn't provide stipends to replace lost wages. It doesn't offer childcare. It doesn't account for transportation costs. It assumes participants have the luxury of time and resources to invest in their future, but people living paycheck to paycheck don't have that luxury. They need immediate survival more than they need long-term improvement." The room was silent, the board members processing this information. Maya continued, gaining confidence as she spoke. "Your affordable housing initiative provides down payment assistance for first-time home buyers. That's wonderful for people who have steady employment, good credit, and stable income, but it does nothing for people who can't qualify for a mortgage in the first place, who have medical debt or student loans destroying their credit, who work gig economy jobs that don't show consistent income. You're helping people who are on the edge of making it, but you're not reaching the people who are truly struggling." Another board member, a woman in her 50s, spoke up. "So what do you suggest?" "We can't solve systemic poverty with foundation grants." "No, you can't," Maya agreed. "But you can stop designing programs that look good on paper, but fail in practice. The job training program needs to provide living stipends, childcare subsidies, and transportation assistance. Yes, that makes each participant more expensive. But wouldn't you rather have 60 participants complete the program and find employment than have 200 people enroll and only 76 finish? The housing initiative needs a companion program for people who aren't mortgage ready, maybe supporting cooperative housing or rent-to-own models. You have to meet people where they are, not where you wish they were." Marcus was smiling, a genuine expression of pride that made something warm bloom in Maya's chest. The board members were nodding, engaging, asking questions that showed they were actually listening rather than simply being polite. For 2 hours, they discussed programs, budgets, and strategies. Maya found herself relaxing into the conversation, discovering that she did belong in this room, that her experience was expertise, that surviving poverty had taught her things no business degree ever could. When the meeting finally adjourned, several board members approached her personally, thanking her for her insights, asking if she would review their specific initiatives. Victoria pulled her aside with a smile that seemed more genuine than before. "That was impressive. You've given us more useful feedback in one meeting than our last 3 consulting firms combined. Marcus was right to bring you on board." As the room emptied, Marcus caught Maya's eye and tilted his head toward the door. They walked together to the elevator, neither speaking until they were alone in the descending car. You were brilliant, Marcus said, and the pride in his voice was unmistakable. You commanded that room. You made them understand what they've been missing. I was terrified, Maya admitted. Those people could buy and sell my entire life with pocket change, but they can't buy what you know. They can't purchase the perspective you bring. That's why you have power in that room, Maya. Real power, not the kind that comes from a bank account. They met at their bench by the river as planned, the city lights reflecting off the water in shimmering patterns. The media frenzy had calmed slightly over the past few days, the initial explosion of interest fading as Marcus had predicted. But the scrutiny hadn't disappeared entirely. Maya still got recognized occasionally, still saw articles analyzing their relationship, still felt the weight of being a public figure in ways she never had before. I got an email today, Marcus said, staring out at the water. Daniel, my ex-husband. Maya turned to him, surprised. In all their conversations, Marcus had never mentioned an ex-husband, never talked about past relationships at all. I didn't know you were married for 5 years. We divorced 3 years ago. It was amicable as much as any divorce can be. He married me when I was Marcus Wellington Ashford, heir to a fortune, and he left me when he realized that's all I would ever be. He wanted a partner, not a dynasty. I couldn't give him that. Marcus's voice was flat, reciting facts without emotion. Saw the news about you. He wanted to tell me he was happy for me, that he hopes I've finally found someone who sees me rather than my net worth. What did you tell him? Nothing yet, because I don't know what to tell him. Marcus turned to face her, and Maya saw vulnerability in his expression that took her breath away. What are we, Maya? I told you at the beginning that I wanted friendship, that I needed someone who saw me as just Marcus, and you've given me that. But somewhere along the way, this became more complicated than friendship. I think about you when I count down hours until 3:15. I read articles about you and feel this surge of protective anger when people say cruel things, and I don't know what to do with those feelings. Maya's heart was pounding. She had been carefully not examining her own feelings, deliberately keeping them in a box labeled friendship because anything else felt too dangerous, too impossible. But hearing Marcus articulate what she had been avoiding forced her to confront the truth she had been hiding from. I don't know either, she said quietly. You're the first person in years who has made me feel seen, not as a waitress or a poor person or a charity case, but as someone whose thoughts and feelings matter. That's powerful, Marcus. Maybe too powerful, because I can't tell anymore where gratitude ends and something else begins. I don't want your gratitude, Marcus said, and there was intensity in his voice now. I never wanted that. I wanted connection, understanding, someone who could look at me and not see a dollar sign. You gave me that, Maya. You gave me the gift of being ordinary. And now I find myself wanting more. Wanting things I have no right to want, given the power imbalance between us, given how we met, given everything. They sat in charged silence, the truth hanging between them like a live wire, dangerous to touch but impossible to ignore. Maya thought about Jasmine's warning, about her mother's concern, about all the people who would say this was inevitable, that a powerful man and a woman he had helped would always end up here. But she also thought about 3 months of afternoons, of genuine conversations, of two lonely people finding refuge in each other. What if we're making this more complicated than it needs to be? Maya asked. What if we just admit that yes, this started as friendship, but it's grown into something else? What if we acknowledge that and see where it goes without trying to define it or justify it to anyone else? People will say I took advantage of you. They'll say you felt obligated because I paid your debts. They'll make it ugly, Maya. Everything I touch gets twisted by public perception. Let them say what they want, Maya said with more confidence than she felt. I know the truth. You know the truth. We didn't plan this. We didn't manipulate this. Two people found each other in the most unlikely circumstances, and something real developed. That's not a scandal. That's just life, messy and complicated and real. Marcus reached out and took her hand. The first time they had touched beyond casual handshakes and polite gestures. His fingers intertwined with hers, and Maya felt the rightness of it, the way their hands fit together despite everything that should have kept them apart. I don't want to lose table 12, Marcus said. I don't want to lose 3:15 and black coffee and see you tomorrow, sir. That's where this started. That's what matters. Then we don't lose it, Maya said firmly. Whatever else we become, we keep that. We protect it. Because you're right, that's sacred. That's ours. They sat together on the bench, hands clasped, watching the river flow past, both of them aware that they had crossed a line they couldn't uncross. Tomorrow would bring new complications, new challenges, new reasons why this shouldn't work. But tonight, they had this moment, this understanding, this acknowledgement that sometimes the most unlikely connections become the most important ones. 6 months later, Maya stood in the same conference room where she had given her first board presentation. But everything felt different now. She wore a tailored suit that actually fit, her confidence no longer performative but genuine. The board members greeted her by name, asked about her recommendations with real interest, treated her not as an oddity but as an essential voice in their decision-making process. The foundation's work had transformed under her guidance. The job training program now included living stipends and childcare support, and the completion rate had jumped to 78%. The housing initiative had expanded to include transitional programs for people not yet mortgage ready. Every grant proposal now included a section specifically addressing accessibility for the people most in need, questions that Maya had trained the staff to ask. The impact was measurable, quantifiable, and undeniably real. Victoria had become something close to a friend, their initial wariness transforming into genuine collaboration. The Riverside program proposal is ready for your review, she said, sliding a folder across the table to Maya. "I think you're going to love it." Maya opened the folder and felt emotion tighten her throat. It was a grant proposal to support small businesses in low-income neighborhoods, specifically cafes and restaurants that served as community gathering spaces. The proposal included funding for employee benefits, fair wages, and infrastructure improvement. It was designed to help places like the Riverside thrive while supporting the workers who made them run. "This is perfect," Maya said, her voice catching slightly. "This is exactly what we should be doing." Marcus, sitting across the table, smiled at her with unconcealed pride. Their relationship was no longer a secret, though they had been careful about how they presented it publicly. They were colleagues first, partners in the foundation's work, and the romance that had developed was treated as a natural evolution rather than a scandal. The media had largely moved on to newer stories, though occasionally an article would appear analyzing their relationship as either a modern fairy tale or a cautionary tale about power dynamics, depending on the author's perspective. But what mattered most to Maya was what hadn't changed. Every afternoon at 3:15, Marcus still walked through the doors of the Riverside Cafe. He still sat at table 12, and Maya, on the days she worked her shifts, still brought him black coffee and whatever the daily special was. The routine had become legendary among the cafe's regulars, a touchstone of consistency in an ever-changing world. The cafe itself had changed, though not in ways that destroyed its essential character. The owner had used some of the increased business from curious visitors to give the staff raises and improve working conditions. Jasmine had been promoted to manager. The place was busier now, more prosperous, but it remained the comfortable, unpretentious space it had always been. Maya still worked shifts at the Riverside twice a week, refusing to give it up despite Marcus's gentle suggestions that her foundation salary made it unnecessary. She needed the anchor, the reminder of where she had come from and what she was fighting for. The tips she earned now went into a savings account she had established to help other waitresses in crisis, a private fund that she and Marcus had quietly created together. On this particular afternoon, Maya finished the board meeting and headed directly to the Riverside for her evening shift. She changed in the staff bathroom, trading her tailored suit for the familiar uniform, and felt something settle in her chest. This was home in a way the glass tower would never be. This was where she belonged, even as she also belonged in those conference rooms, speaking truth to power. At 3:15 exactly, the door opened. Maya smiled before she even turned around, knowing who it would be. Marcus walked in, and the few customers who recognized him barely reacted anymore. He was just another regular now, the novelty worn off through months of consistent, unremarkable visits. He sat at table 12. Maya grabbed her notepad and approached, letting herself feel the simple joy of this moment, this routine that had started everything. "Good afternoon." "The usual?" Marcus looked up at her, and the warmth in his eyes made her heart skip. "Actually, I was thinking of trying something different today." Maya raised an eyebrow, surprised. In all these months, he had never deviated from black coffee and the daily special. "Oh, what did you have in mind?" "Whatever you recommend. I trust your judgment." It was such a small thing, but it carried weight. Trust. After everything they had been through, all the scrutiny and complication, it came down to this simple statement: "I trust you." Maya smiled, feeling the significance of the moment even as she kept her professional demeanor for the other customers. "I'll surprise you." She brought him a cappuccino instead of black coffee, and the sandwich special with a side of the apple pie that had become his favorite. When she set it down, Marcus looked at the cappuccino with amusement. "Trying to civilize me." "Just reminding you that change isn't always bad," Maya said quietly. "Sometimes it's exactly what you need, even if you didn't know you needed it." They both understood she wasn't just talking about coffee. Later that evening, after Marcus had left and Maya's shift was winding down, a young woman approached the counter. She was maybe 22, wearing a waitress uniform from a diner down the street, her eyes carrying the particular exhaustion Maya recognized from her own reflection not so long ago. "Are you Maya Chun?" the young woman asked nervously. "I am. I'm sorry to bother you, but I read about you, about how you were working here and struggling and how someone helped you and how you turned it into something real. I'm in college trying to make tuition, and I'm drowning. I know this is crazy, but I was wondering if you had any advice." Maya felt something shift in her chest. This was why it all mattered, why she had been willing to face the scrutiny and judgment, not just to help herself, but to show others that escape from the cycle of poverty was possible, that asking for help wasn't weakness, that one person's story could illuminate the path for others. "What's your name?" "Jennifer." "Jennifer, do you have a few minutes? Let me buy you coffee and we can talk." They sat at a table near the window, and Maya listened as Jennifer described circumstances painfully similar to her own from months ago. Medical debt, family obligations, the impossible math of trying to build a future while barely surviving the present. As Jennifer talked, Maya pulled out her phone and made a note. The private fund she and Marcus had created was designed for exactly this situation. "I can't promise miracles," Maya said when Jennifer finished, "but I might be able to help connect you with resources. And Jennifer, the fact that you asked for help, that you reached out instead of suffering in silence, that takes courage. Don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise." Jennifer left with Maya's contact information and something that looked like hope in her eyes. Maya watched her go, thinking about the ripple effects of kindness, about how Marcus helping her had enabled her to help others, about how one moment of seeing another person's humanity could cascade into something transformative. When Maya's shift ended and she prepared to leave, she found Marcus waiting outside. He had a habit of meeting her after evening shifts, walking her home through streets that felt safer with him beside her. It was old-fashioned and probably unnecessary with a security team discreetly following, but it was also sweet, a gesture that reminded her he saw protecting her time together as important as any business deal. "Good shift?" he asked as they started walking. "I met someone today, a waitress struggling with debt and school costs. She reminded me of myself 6 months ago." "What did you tell her?" "That asking for help is brave, that her circumstances don't define her worth, that there are people who want to help if she's willing to accept it." Maya looked up at him. "The things you taught me by example." Marcus took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. "You taught me things too. You reminded me that wealth without purpose is just numbers in an account. You showed me that the most valuable currency is being seen for who you are, not what you have. You gave me back my humanity, Maya." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the city humming around them with evening energy. Maya thought about how far they had both come, how much had changed, how much had stayed the same. "Tomorrow," Marcus said as they reached her building. 3:15? Maya smiled, the same smile she had given him dozens of times, the one that had started everything. "I'll be there. Table 12 will be waiting, and you'll ask if I want the ute. Always." Marcus leaned down and kissed her forehead, a gesture of affection that felt perfect for this moment. "See you tomorrow, Maya." She watched him walk away, his security team materializing from the shadows to accompany him, the billionaire returning to his world while she returned to hers. But tomorrow at 3:15, those worlds would intersect again at table 12 in a modest cafe by the river, over black coffee and whatever the special happened to be. Maya climbed the stairs to her apartment, which was nicer now, in a better building, but still modest, still grounded in the reality of who she was and where she came from. She thought about Jennifer, about the young woman she had been 6 months ago, about all the people still struggling in the gap between where they were and where they wanted to be. One person's kindness had changed her life, and now she had the opportunity, the platform, and the resources to extend that kindness to others. It wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect end. It was something better, something real. It was the messy, complicated, beautiful truth of two people who had found each other in the most unlikely circumstances and built something genuine from that connection. Tomorrow, Marcus would walk through the cafe doors at 3:15. Maya would greet him with her notepad and her professional smile. She would ask if he wanted the usual. He would say please, and in that simple exchange, in that ritual they had protected through months of chaos and scrutiny, they would remember what mattered most. Not the money, not the status, not the foundation work or the public perception. Just two people who saw each other clearly, who valued ordinary moments of connection in an extraordinary world, who understood that sometimes the most profound relationships begin with the simplest gestures. A cup of coffee, kind word, a promise kept day after day. "See you tomorrow, sir." Not goodbye, never goodbye. Always the promise of another day, another afternoon, another chance to be simply themselves in a world that constantly demanded they be something more. That promise was everything. That promise was enough.